If Carl Jung had only one page to write to those who feel exhausted from trying, he might begin like this. You are not failing. You are waking up. Yet waking up can sometimes be the most difficult part of the dream. You have tried before. You attempted to change habits, listened to podcasts, followed advice, set goals, and tried to think positively. Perhaps for a few days you even convinced yourself that this time it would truly work. But when that initial excitement fades, what remains is only the echo of something that never quite holds. Motivation was never the real problem. It naturally rises and falls. What may be missing is an action that does not rely on emotional highs, a simple, honest action that you can actually do. A choice aligned with how you genuinely feel today, not with how others expect you to feel. This is not a video meant to motivate you. Instead, it is an invitation to stop moving in circles while trying to repair yourself and finally begin acting. So stay with this until the end if a part of you still believes there might be another way to begin again. A way that is calmer, more truthful, and genuinely your own. Because perhaps real change begins the moment you decide to remain where you are, even when you still do not know how to move forward. And if you have not subscribed to the channel yet, remember to do so. There is much more insight coming your way. Have you noticed how the idea of a fresh start has slowly turned into a form of anesthesia? I'll start on Monday, next month, after the holidays, when everything calms down. It is always later, rarely now. And while that future moment never seems to arrive, thy life quietly continues passing by. Not through dramatic events, but through small, silent surrenders. You are still here, yet a part of you has been left somewhere behind. The part that once believed strongly, acted with courage, and clearly knew what it wanted. Now what remains often feels like a strange loop. Hope for something new exists alongside the fear of repeating what already happened. And so the cycle continues. You begin with intention, yet something interferes. A moment of discouragement, a setback, or a convincing excuse. And suddenly you are back at the beginning again. Every attempt leaves a small mark, almost invisible at first, but deepening over time. It is more than frustration. It becomes a quiet farewell to all the versions of yourself that tried and slowly lost their way. Carl Jung once said, "Nothing changes until it becomes conscious." And that realization changes everything. Because perhaps what is holding you back is not a lack of effort, but a lack of awareness about what truly drives your decisions. It has never been about willpower. It is about awareness. Recognizing that your life may have been shaped by beliefs you do not even realize you carry. Inherited fears, invisible expectations, roles you adopted without fully noticing. Now those same patterns may be suffocating you, even if you cannot clearly explain why. This is the emptiness that keeps the cycle repeating. You do not fully understand why progress feels impossible, yet something inside you feels restrained, as if a hidden hand is holding you back. But that hand may not be dragging you backward. It may simply be warning you. You still may not know what must be released. And realizing that can hurt, because it requires facing the possibility that the problem was never only the world, the circumstances, or the people around you. Perhaps it was this pattern of almost doing it, almost succeeding, almost changing. Over time, that almost quietly became a way of living. Yet now you are here, noticing this pattern. And that recognition alone already begins to break the loop. Real change does not come from short bursts of motivation. It grows from genuine awareness. And awareness is the starting point of any transformation that truly matters. Now that you are beginning to see the pattern, you may also realize something else. It is not laziness, bad luck, or weakness. It is repetition. Something deeper interrupts you just before the next step. And once that pattern becomes visible, a natural question appears. What within me keeps preventing progress? The answer may not be comfortable, but it can be freeing. Carl Jung called this hidden part the shadow, the part of yourself you learn to hide, deny, or disguise. Not because it is evil, but because at some point it was judged unacceptable. Your ego discovered that to be accepted or loved, certain qualities had to remain silent. Anger, selfish impulses, fear, insecurity, but also spontaneity, desire, and intuition. All of these were pushed into the basement of the mind. With every decision made to please others, to belong, or simply to survive, a piece of yourself remained there waiting, not to sabotage you, but to be recognized. The shadow is not the darkness within you. It is the forgotten part of you. And whatever is forgotten eventually demands recognition. It appears when you sabotage yourself, when you repeat a decision you promised never to repeat, when anger rises without a clear reason, when you react harshly and later feel regret, when you stay silent to keep harmony but feel increasingly distant from who you truly are. As long as the shadow remains unintegrated, it continues acting on its own. You may call it impulse, relapse, or self-sabotage, but at its core, it is simply a neglected part of you trying to return home. Integrating the shadow does not mean removing anything. It means including it. It means looking inward and acknowledging, this is also me. With discomfort, with fear, with shame perhaps, but with honesty. Without this encounter, freedom cannot exist. Because true freedom does not come from perfection. It comes from wholeness. Later in this video, practical ways to approach this process will be discussed. But for now, remember this. The cycle repeating in your life is not caused by weakness. It comes from fragmentation. And when you slowly begin gathering those scattered pieces, something new begins to form. At that moment, the unconscious, which had quietly guided your actions, starts to become visible. And once you see it, your inner world gradually begins to reorganize. But there is something very important to understand. Even on the days when everything feels still, something inside you is moving. While the surface may appear calm, the deeper layers of the mind remain active. It is easy to assume that if you are not consciously trying, then nothing is happening. Yet the unconscious does not wait for intention. It continues working regardless. Carl Jung understood this clearly. He recognized that much of what shapes our lives does not originate from logic or conscious control. Patterns repeat not necessarily because you deliberately choose them, but because an internal mechanism continues operating beneath awareness. This is not a conspiracy against you. It is simply an unseen structure continuing to function. It is not bad luck or carelessness. It is the unconscious maintaining familiar patterns, even when those patterns cause pain. However, there is an important realization here. The unconscious is not only repeating past wounds, it is also attempting to reorganize you. Even if it feels confusing, there is a direction to this process. That direction has a name, the self. Not the ideal version of yourself, but an inner center that seeks to integrate everything, what you show the world, what you hide, and what you still do not understand about yourself. This inner center does not demand that you eliminate parts of who you are. It invites you to stop running from them, The anger you hide, the fear you cover with constant productivity, the sadness you keep postponing, all of it asks to be acknowledged. Because once these emotions are seen clearly, they lose the power to control your life from the shadows. That is why discomfort increases when you attempt to live while ignoring what you truly feel. That discomfort is not a defect. It is a message asking to be heard. You do not need to solve everything today. But you do need to stop ignoring the signals that have been calling your attention for a long time. The stagnation you experience may simply be the sound of your inner life asking for space. And perhaps the most important realization now is this: it is not the absence of movement. It is movement you have not yet learned to understand. Change does not hurt only because the new feels uncertain. It also hurts because the old still provides a kind of shelter, even when that shelter is already collapsing. You are not truly afraid of change itself. You are afraid of what must be released, the parts of yourself you will need to leave behind, the identity that once provided a sense of control even while wounded. Pain quietly builds identities. You adapt to them. You become the strong one who manages everything, or the one who adjusts to every situation, or the person who pretends everything is fine because expressing emotions once felt inconvenient or unsafe. Over time, you may begin to believe that this is who you truly are. But it is not your essence. It is simply the structure you created to survive. Carl Jung described this structure as the persona, the mask we develop to function in society. At first, it protects us. It organizes life and helps us navigate the world. But gradually, it can become a prison. The more you live through the persona, the further you drift from your inner life, and the further you move away from the deeper truth that quietly tries to emerge during moments of silence. Removing that mask can be frightening, because it is no longer just a mask. It feels attached to your identity. Peeling it away can feel like losing a part of yourself, not physically, but psychologically. Every meaningful transformation carries a form of mourning. Not mourning what you lost, but mourning the identity you will no longer continue being. That experience is natural. It is deeply human. Resistance to change does not mean weakness. It reflects the fear of losing what has supported you until now. Yet eventually, there comes a moment when carrying that older version becomes too heavy. It no longer fits. You begin to realize that you are trying to preserve something that was once necessary, but now prevents you from breathing freely. The fear holding you back does not need to be defeated. It needs to be understood. What truly paralyzes you is not change itself. It is the emotional emptiness that appears before something new takes shape. And this is exactly where many people give up. Not because they lack the desire to change, but because no one explained that transformation also involves grief. Every form of grief requires time, attention, and compassion. You are not failing because you feel afraid. You are simply encountering one of the most meaningful moments of the journey, saying goodbye to what once protected you but can no longer carry you forward. At this point, what you likely do not need is another podcast, another inspirational video, more powerful quotes, another course, a new method, or even a perfectly organized planner. What your inner life may truly be asking for now is not more information. It is silence. And silence can feel frightening because within it, there are no distractions, no quick explanations, no bursts of dopamine. There is only you and the emotions you have been avoiding. The world trained you to search outside for answers that can only emerge from within. It offered techniques, formulas, mentors, and powerful speeches. For a time, those things seemed meaningful. Yet eventually, there came a moment when, even equipped with all those tools, you began to feel emptier than before. This is where many people lose their direction, because the experience feels contradictory. The more you try to understand yourself, the more confused you become. Not because you lack effort, but because you are trying to hear your inner voice while surrounded by countless external voices. Carl Jung warned about this clearly. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens. But looking inward requires something the modern world rarely allows: pause. Not the performative pause seen on social media, with a coffee photo and a caption about self-care. Instead, a raw pause without distraction. The kind of pause that forces you to hear the questions you once avoided asking. Am I living according to my own path, or the path others expect from me? Is what drives me truly mine, or something I was taught to desire? If everything became quiet right now, what would remain of me? This is why many people run from emptiness, because inside that emptiness lives truth. And truth, when it appears, does not ask for performance. It asks for presence. You are not overwhelmed because you lack information. You are overwhelmed because you have absorbed too much for too long. What you may need now is a kind of detox from endless references, constant comparisons, and the fear of falling behind. The soul asks for silence when the mind becomes too noisy to hear it. Stopping can feel risky, because the moment you stop, everything you have been suppressing begins to rise to the surface. Yet it is also exactly there that something new can finally begin to speak. Not loudly, not with perfect answers, but calmly, like someone who is present within themselves for the first time in a long while. You are not broken. You are simply full of attempts, full of pressure, full of expectations that were never truly yours, but that you carried anyway. You are not failing because you are tired. You are tired because you spent too long trying not to fail. There is a difference between being destroyed and being saturated. A person who is destroyed has lost everything. But someone who is saturated is still carrying everything, and that weight becomes exhausting. You spent years trying to align with what others expected, with what society defined as correct, with what seemed to work for everyone else. Gradually, the overload became too much. Now the body feels exhausted. The mind resists. The heart becomes distant. This is not a personal flaw. It is the nervous system asking for relief. It is the soul saying, I cannot keep functioning like a machine. You do not need more effort right now. You need space to breathe, to feel, to stop performing a version of healing while you are still trying to rediscover yourself. Carl Jung understood this with remarkable clarity. He knew the psyche does not suffer only from intense pain, but also from excessive suppression, from feelings that remain unspoken, from constant self-demands without compassion, and from the energy spent pretending everything is fine. Often what a person truly needs is simply time to exist without pressure. You do not need to be fixed. You need to be heard. And perhaps that is enough for now. An honest attempt to listen to what your body has already been expressing, even in silence. A pause is not the end of the journey. It is what makes it possible to walk again with less weight. Moving forward without stopping would be like trying to run while carrying an open wound. Respecting your exhaustion is not surrender. It is the recognition that sometimes the only way forward is to stop forcing yourself to remain the same. You are not defeated. You are simply exhausted. And there is a kind of beginning that only becomes possible after this level of fatigue. the kind that strips away everything unnecessary, not out of weakness, but out of truth. Sometimes you feel the desire to disappear for a while, not to be seen, not to answer questions, not to explain what you are feeling, especially when most of the time you do not fully understand it yourself, and then you blame yourself for that confusion. You call yourself weak, ungrateful, overly dramatic. But what few people recognize is that this desire to disappear is not always an escape from life. Often it is a call to return to yourself. You do not want to vanish from the world. You want to disappear from the noise, from the constant demand to appear okay, from the exhaustion of maintaining a stability you no longer feel. You want distance from expectations, from constant observation, from the pressure of other people's opinions. Because over time, those pressures pulled you away from who you once were, and from who you still are deep inside. It becomes a longing, not necessarily for childhood or for a specific moment in the past, but for the version of yourself that once felt enough. The version that did not need to constantly prove its worth. The version that could be imperfect yet still feel complete. Eventually, the pressure to continuously improve can become a form of self-violence. And when that moment arrives, the desire to stop everything becomes an act of self-protection. Your system is trying to save you from overload. Your soul is asking for help in a language the world rarely understands. Silence, withdrawal, retreat. Carl Jung described individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, as a journey that requires this inward descent. And sometimes descending inward requires stepping away, not as abandonment, but as preparation for return. You do not wish to disappear because you are weak. You wish to disappear because you miss feeling whole. Whole not as perfect, but as connected to what is real within you, even when that reality feels messy, tired, or uncertain. Perhaps you do not need to hide from the world. Perhaps you only need a space where you can exist without explanation. A space that belongs to you, even if it is small, even if it is temporary, even if it begins with a simple admission. I am tired of trying to be who others expect me to be. That moment becomes the beginning of a return. Slow, quiet, honest. And every return begins with a retreat. Not disappearance, but reunion. Up to this point, you have walked inward. You recognized the cycle. You noticed what was hidden. You felt the weight of carrying many versions of yourself without pause, without listening, without rest. Now it is time to do something with that awareness. From this point forward, the practical stage begins. Small actions, simple gestures. Nothing that demands more energy than you currently have. Only enough for the transformation already happening within you to begin appearing in your outer life. And the first step begins with something very simple: a pen in your hand. You spent so long trying to understand what you feel that perhaps you forgot the simplest possibility: placing it on paper. Not to organize plans, not to structure ideas, but to create a space where you can exist without performance. At this stage of the journey, writing is no longer a tool for control. It becomes a ritual, a way of bringing to the surface what was hidden, naming what felt impossible to explain, creating a meeting not with answers, but with yourself. Carl Jung described this process as active imagination, a dialogue with the unconscious expressed through symbolic language. One of the most accessible forms of this dialogue is spontaneous writing. No outline, no filter, no attempt to impress anyone. You simply take a notebook and begin writing. Even if the first sentence is only, I do not know what I am feeling right now. That is already listening. That is already presence. Writing becomes the place where the soul can speak without interruption. A place where you can be confused, vulnerable, uncertain, and still authentic. The page does not judge. It reflects. It returns what was buried under layers of noise, urgency, and fear. Perhaps you have never said these things to anyone. Perhaps you did not even realize you felt them. But when you write, you reveal. And in that revealing, something inside begins to reorganize. The purpose is not to write beautifully. The purpose is to write truthfully, to allow your hand to express what your mind has not yet dared to think. Chaos slowly becomes clarity, not because everything is solved, but because for a few moments you truly listen to yourself. In a world where everyone speaks but few listen, that act alone becomes healing. Do not write in order to fit in. Write in order to rediscover yourself. After spending so long adapting to expectations, you may need a place without comparison, without pressure, without the demand to explain everything. Writing can become that place, a private corner where truth is allowed to appear exactly as it is, without decoration, without emotional masks. You do not need perfect grammar or a structured story with a beginning, middle, and end. You only need to begin. Maybe today the only sentence you can write is, "I do not know what I feel anymore," and that is completely acceptable. That sentence is already more honest than many polished speeches about personal growth. Few people truly understand the real purpose of writing. It is not only for expression, it is for listening. When you write without filtering your thoughts, without editing yourself, something slowly begins to surface. Something that has been silent for a long time, waiting for recognition. Do not try to make it logical. Do not attempt to write what you think you should feel. Write what exists right now, even if it is chaotic, angry, or hopeless. The page does not require coherence. It simply reflects what you offer, and in doing so, it reveals. Carl Jung once observed that what is not brought into consciousness eventually returns as fate. Writing creates a direct bridge between the unconscious mind and emotional clarity, not to control the pain, but to meet it with honesty. And that honesty, by itself, becomes an act of care. Writing down what lives inside you each day is a simple way to remain connected to what truly matters. Not goals, not strategies, but small pieces of presence. And perhaps you will notice that behind the pain, the fear, and the confusion, there is still a voice that believes. It may be quiet, but it exists. Writing is one of the most direct ways to allow that voice to speak. You do not need to begin with something big. You only need to begin. After so much noise, pressure, and expectation, the real difference rarely comes from a dramatic turning point. Instead, it grows from a small, personal, consistent action. Something that does not demand strength or heroic courage, only presence. You do not need a perfect routine. What you need is a space that belongs to you, even if it is only 3 minutes a day. 3 lines written honestly. 3 lines that describe what is present right now, without filters, without planning, and without the pressure to be productive. Writing 3 lines each day may seem insignificant, yet inside that small act, there is an entire universe. Those lines are not only words, they are anchors. They remind you that you are here, that you matter, that there is a place where your truth can breathe. Do not underestimate the quiet power of repetition. Do not overlook the impact of a small action carried out with intention. Real transformation almost never begins with noise or spectacle. It begins in everyday life, within a simple ritual that you continue practicing, even when you feel tired, even when it seems ineffective, even when everything feels unchanged. Then one day, something shifts. You notice you are more present. Your emotions become clearer. You no longer abandon yourself so easily. Not because life suddenly became perfect, but because you created a stable point within the chaos, a place you can always return to when the world becomes overwhelming. This is the beginning, small but genuine. And everything that is genuine grows in its own rhythm, in its own time, with its own imperfections and returns. But it grows because it was planted with truth. Now imagine that Carl Jung were writing you a letter based on everything he taught. The letter might begin like this: "You are not failing. You are awakening. If you have reached this moment, it means there is still a part of you that has not given up. Even if it is small, even if it feels exhausted, even if it is almost silent, that part is real. And it is that part I want to speak to now. You are not lost. You are standing at a stage of the path where external lights can no longer guide you. But this is not the end. It is the beginning of deeper listening. The world trained you to search for meaning outside yourself. Yet eventually there comes a moment. Perhaps this is that moment, when your soul begins asking for the opposite. Less answers, more silence, less content, more presence, less control, more surrender. The unconscious is not the enemy of your story. It is the field where both your fears and your strengths are hidden. And it continues working, even when you believe you are standing still. The difference now is that you are beginning to notice. Carl Jung once explained that what remains unconscious eventually appears in life as fate. And perhaps now is the time to rewrite yours. Not with urgency, not to satisfy anyone else, but slowly, like someone carefully lifting the rubble from their own shoulders. You are more than the roles you learned to perform, more than the patterns you keep repeating, more than the mistakes you remember. There is something within you that has always been whole, even during the moments when everything around you seemed broken. Reconnecting with that part may be painful. It may confuse you. At times it may even dismantle parts of your identity. Yet it will also restore you, not to a perfect version of yourself, but to a version that is more honest, more alive, and more present. And everything begins with a simple action: staying. Stay with yourself. Listen without judgment. Write what you feel, even if you do not fully understand it. Return inward like someone coming home after being away for a long time. This letter is not literally written by Carl Jung, but it could almost be, because it reflects what his work teaches us to see. That within every crisis there exists possibility, and within every person there is a center that never stopped beating. May you find your way back to that center with time, with patience, and with truth. So perhaps right now you still do not feel ready, and that is completely fine. Maybe the confusion remains. The exhaustion may still be present. That inner voice demanding strength might still insist that something is missing. But what you might not yet realize is that something has already begun to change. You are listening. And listening to yourself honestly, without skipping steps, without forcing answers, is one of the most powerful things you can do. Transformation does not come from the urge to fix everything immediately. It grows from the quiet commitment to stay with yourself, even when every part of you wants to escape. It means having the courage to sit with what hurts, what confuses you, what seems hopeless, and saying, "I am here. I will not abandon myself. The life you are searching for does not begin with an ideal version of you. It begins with the version that exists right now. Tired, perhaps. Full of doubt, maybe. But present. And real presence is enough. It does not require goals. It does not require performance. It only needs a small gesture repeated with intention. A personal space, a single line written, a moment of genuine listening. Transformation rarely shouts. It does not rush. It whispers. And it whispers every day, waiting for you to stop running outward and begin returning inward. Do not worry about believing in yourself right now. That belief will come later as a natural result of reconnecting with who you are. What matters today is simply that you stay, that you breathe, that you listen. Because when you truly listen to yourself, without trying to fix everything, without silencing your feelings, without forcing clarity, something inside begins to realign. And within that space, even if it is small, even if it feels fragile, something begins to grow that no external content could ever give you. Your own presence as a starting point. If you made it this far, leave a comment saying, "I received the letter." That way I will know this message reached you and that you chose to continue the journey. And if this video resonated with you and you believe it could help others who may need to hear it, you can support this channel through the thanks button below. Your support genuinely helps these messages continue to be created with the care, depth, and honesty you experienced here. Thank you for choosing not to abandon yourself. I will see you in the next video.